Hello and a very warm welcome back to Sport with me, Dan George. It's boxing time again here on the channel, and we're going to talk about the upcoming undisputed heavyweight clash between Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk. And I thought, who can I bring on to chat about this monumental fight and more with? And I brought on my good friend, I'm pleased to say, Darren Rees, boxing producer, reporter, commentator for the BBC. Darren, great to have you here. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, all good, mate. I'm just in the garden. Sun is shining, making the most of it. We've had a miserable few months, haven't we? So any opportunity, I'm out here. So if anyone's thinking, what's he doing? That's what I'm doing. I'm out here lapping it up.
Mate, I don't blame you at all. I don't blame you at all. I mean, not quite Riyadh, not quite the sunshine. I'm sure that's out there. I saw Steve Bunce put a video of him walking just over some like sand dunes or something on his Twitter yesterday or something. But it looks hot out there. But we're really looking forward to this fight. Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk. I remember we actually spoke when the fight got postponed on the radio. I remember because of Tyson Fury's cut, and it's just good to see the fight. Back on and coming up this weekend, and it's one that did you always believe this fight would happen personally?
Do you know? I always say with big fights like this, that I believe it when they get in the ring. But it is nice to
Mm,
see that we've got to fight week. And I was trying to remember earlier on because I was speaking to a radio station in New Zealand about this fight because everyone all around the world's excited about it. And then I had to jog my memory, and there was a load of politics over rematch clauses. And you might remember Fury was putting a load of stuff out, and I think it featured in his documentary with on Netflix at Home of the
yeah.
Furies, and he was giving them deadlines of, if it's not done by 5 p.m., then it's, the fight's off. So we had all of that stuff, and then the fight eventually came. Uh, there was a date set for it to happen, wasn't there? And then
Mm.
he got cut, and then there was a new date, and everyone was like, oh, "Is that cut really gonna heal in time for May 18th?" But yeah, he looks in good shape, Fury, and he looks in good spirits, and he's up to his usual tricks, and his eye looks okay. Whether that'll open up in the fight, I'm not sure. But yeah, to answer your question, until they both get in that ring, yeah, it's a bit cynical, I know, and a bit pessimistic, but that's what I believe it.
And we got to talk about it because it's a big talking point on lots of media kind of channels and stations this week. But what do you make of the whole John Fury situation, headbutting someone, and Tyson almost lapping it up, and it's all part of selling the fight? Is that just what comes with the Tyson Fury package and his family? Because yeah, Tyson was just like, it's just part of selling the fight, and we're not normal kind of human beings in some ways. If you put us all in a room with different people, then stuff's going to happen.
Yeah, I did see a clip of Tyson saying that. He said, we're not a room full of educated, professional people. And I thought, well, I mean, it's not really the way to look at it, is it? And it's
Mm,
not really the way to act in terms of John Fury in any walk of life. And just because it's boxing and there'll be two people in the ring on Saturday night with gloves on who will be, causing harm to each other, it doesn't mean that people have got to act in a particular way outside of the ring. So I'm just not a massive fan of it. And with fights, I might have said this to you before, Dan, is there's a few different categories which this stuff sits into. So you get fights that proper boxing purists, people like you and I, we watch everything because we love it. So there's that category of fights, and then you've got the category of fights where sports fans, people who like football, who like rugby, who like tennis, who like cricket, sports fans will watch it, and then you get fights where just the general public watch it, and
mm,
this is one of those fights which is capturing the imagination of the general public. And me, as a boxing enthusiast and someone who works within the sport and the job that I do, I need and I want as many people to be excited about this stuff as possible. And I want, like many people, a positive light to be shining on our sport as much as possible. So when you get a viral clip, which has already been seen millions of times, of John Fury headbutting someone, I know there was an altercation, and you can't say he wasn't unprovoked, but it's not a good look, is it? But my theory is with this as well is I don't think this is just John Fury being John Fury. I think this is a bit of a tactic because the Furies are pretty good at this stuff. I think they're trying to unsettle the Oleksandr Usyk camp just like they did with the Vladimir Klitschko camp, which I think was back in 2015. People might remember when Peter Fury, Tyson's uncle, said that he wanted a layer of the ring canvas removed. There was a thick layer of sponge, and they said if you don't do it, the fight's off. And there was all this kind of stuff. And Vladimir Klitschko was rattled by that. And I think that whole thing with the headbutt and the altercation the other day, a couple of days ago, is exactly what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to unsettle the Usyk camp, but I think they're going to fail miserably doing it because he's a completely different character to what Vladimir Klitschko was.
Yeah, it's a really, really exciting fight, and it's an interesting matchup as well, Darren, because I don't know what you think, but I think it's interesting how, both fighters have been relatively kind of inactive in some ways. Obviously, Tyson Fury had that fight against Francis Ngannou. That was his last fight. And the last time Usyk fought was against Daniel Dubois, which feels like a long, long time ago, back when he got dropped by that body shot, low blow, whatever you want to call it. Do you have a view on it? Low blow body shot? I mean, did you have a view on it at the time?
I think I can't remember it too much now. I remember there was a big saga around it, wasn't there? And it was how high his shorts were. To be honest, it's not fresh enough in my mind for me to be able to give a valid opinion on it. But it does show that there is a potential weakness there for Oleksandr Usyk, and there ain't many, so you've got to try and find one. And I imagine that on Saturday, Tyson Fury will be throwing a lot of shots into the body and seeing if there is something which he can, if that is a weakness he can expose and make the most of. But yeah, the Daniel Dubois one, I do remember it, but I can't remember it fresh enough.
It's crazy as well, though, how like in some parallel universe, Daniel Dubois could be, unified heavyweight champion of the world, fighting Tyson Fury in Riyadh this weekend. But that would have been bizarre. But just wanted to ask you first of all, on Tyson Fury. He's lost a lot of weight coming into this fight. He's looking, a lot lighter. He's looking a lot leaner, I'd say, compared to how he went into the Ngannou fight. Do you think that? How do you think that holds him in going into a fight like this, going into, someone as mobile as Oleksandr Usyk, previously a cruiserweight coming up to heavyweight? His mobility will probably be a big factor in this fight. Do you feel like Fury could have maybe had more of an advantage if he stayed maybe a bit bigger, a bit heavier, or do you think that you quite like the fact that he's maybe leaned down a bit more?
Well, I think the first thing that we can learn from the shape which he's in is that he's taken this fight seriously. I believe he came in at something like 277 pounds when he boxed Francis Ngannou, which is a career heaviest for Tyson Fury. And it was even heavier. Excuse me. It was even heavier than when he came back from when he was like 30 stone and he had like 2 years out of the boxing ring and he had that first fight back. So that shows how heavy and how out of shape he was when he boxed Ngannou. So yeah, the fact that he's coming in and he's looking a lot leaner, then that to me is a good sign that we're going to get hopefully a 100% version of Tyson Fury. Because he's 6'9" and because he's got a bigger reach and because he's naturally the bigger, heavier man, regardless, no matter how much weight he loses, he's going to have that advantage on him. And I think you're going to see a lot of what Vladimir Klitschko used to do, which is leaning on the opponent. But can he keep Oleksandr Usyk? Can he keep him there for any longer than a couple of seconds? Because he's got to be one of the most slippery boxers in history, and his feet will always get him out of trouble. So yeah, it's a good sign that he's coming in a lot lighter, and it'd be interesting to see what the tactics are. I imagine it will be a lot of long distance, just peppering Usyk with a jab, and then follow it up with big, horrible right hands like Tyson Fury can throw, and like he dropped and demolished Deontay Wilder with. But how effective he can be with it, and how he can use his weight and reach and height with somebody with the ability of Usyk is going to be a bit of a mystery until Saturday night comes.
Do you find it interesting with Tyson Fury? He's been dropped quite a few times recently. Obviously, he was dropped by Ngannou, shocked the world, that punch from Francis Ngannou. And in the Wilder fights, he was dropped Incredible how he managed to come back and get results out of those fights. But do you feel like do you worry for Tyson in some ways that if Usyk lands a big shot, then I mean, would it surprise you if Tyson Fury is on the canvas at some point in this fight?
No, it wouldn't. And so one of the podcasts which I produce is the Opening Bell podcast with Matt Christie and Alex Steedman. Matt Christie's the former boxing news editor. He's recently just moved on from that role, but he's a very
Mm.
shrewd individual and knows his boxing well. And his prediction on this week's podcast is don't be surprised to see Usyk win, and don't be surprised if he wins by stoppage, because the fight with Francis Ngannou where he got dropped, he really didn't look great in that fight at all. But
Mm.
it has got to be a lot of it has got to be down to how little and how much he wasn't up for that fight. But playing devil's advocate here, let's not forget that when Deontay Wilder landed that almighty punch on him in the 12th round of their first fight, I think it was in Vegas, wasn't it? And then that viral clip came out of Tyson Fury getting up with like
Yeah.
a second to go with referee
Mm.
Jack staring in his eyes, and he was said in the interviews afterwards that he was out, and he just got up. And every time Fury's got knocked down in his career, he's got back up. So
Yeah.
he's got the metal, hasn't he? And he's
Yeah.
shown that he's a tough cookie, and it don't matter if you're being hit by one of the biggest punches in the world like Deontay Wilder. And he's proven time and time again that he gets up and he wins fights.
There was incredible meme content that came out of that moment of him getting back up again. And, like, I saw some people saying, me when Christmas dinner leftovers come out, getting back up off the canvas. We
My
go
favourite.
again.
Yeah, that's my favourite. What there was one, wasn't there? It was like when you're lying on the sofa in a food coma and someone brings out the cheese. And I was just like, it was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. How much do you think height's a big thing in this fight, Darren? Of course, there is a fair bit of height difference between the two. Usyk will be, he'll probably have to punch up quite a lot. And do you think that's quite difficult?
So, I mean, it is to a good boxer, but it isn't to a very, very good elite boxer like Usyk. I've literally just been watching Anthony Joshua's first fight with Usyk at Tottenham Stadium. Don't say Tottenham around you, Dan. Blimey. And obviously, Usyk is the smaller man in that fight, but he had no problems with Anthony Joshua. Now, Joshua isn't quite as tall as Fury, and he didn't quite have the reach of what Fury does, but it didn't pose any problems to him. And what I knew anyway, but just kind of really focusing on this when I was just watching that but before I joined you on here, is Usyk just exhausts his opponent mentally, because what he does is he moves his head at every movement. He moves his feet at every movement. He's moving his body at every movement. He's feinting. He changes the patterns of how he throws his punches. He changes what punches he throws. He changes where he throws those punches. He changes how hard those punches land. He changes the angles which they come from. And what happens is the opponent has to be so switched on. They have to be so on it that if they for a second switch off, then he will see it, because he's so good, and he will detonate and he will land, just like he did against Tony Bellew at the Manchester Arena. I was there for that fight, just a few feet away, and I remember watching thinking, cool, Bellew's doing well. Blimey, look, Bellew's doing well. And everyone was thinking the same thing. And then, as we just saw as time went by, he broke him down, and then he just landed that shot. And I think that's what Fury's got to be careful of, because it doesn't matter if Fury boxes at range, and keeps him at the end of his jab, or if he fights him on the inside of the pocket. Usyk's adaptable. He'll find a way.
And for you, how much do you think boxing fans and fight fans in general should appreciate Oleksandr Usyk if he does become unified heavyweight champion of the world, having done it at cruiserweight and heavyweight? The two big boy kind of divisions, the two heaviest, unless you count Bridgerweight too, but you know what I mean, like the two of the biggest weight classes in boxing. How much should people actually just take a second to go, hold on a second, look at what this guy's achieved. If he manages to beat Tyson Fury, win all the belts at, cruiserweight level, and then also at heavyweight, how big of an achievement do you think that would be?
Well, I think if he beats Fury on Saturday, we have to put him, in my opinion, as the number one pound for pound fighter on the planet.
Mm.
Because, like you say, he's done it in both the cruiserweight and the heavyweight division. And there's the whole thing around Tyson Fury being the lineal heavyweight champion, the man who beat the man who beat the man who beat the man, and all that stuff. And just if you just look back at Usyk's career, like he had something around, I don't know what the actual figure is, but I know it's somewhere around 400 amateur fights. 400 amateur fights. He's boxed all around the world. He's boxed in Olympic Games. He's won cruiserweight world titles. He's won world heavyweight titles. He might be the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. But also, have a look at, let's relate it to football a minute. Yeah, look at the Ballon d'Or. So with that, people are awarded that for both their performances on the pitch and the way that they act off of the pitch. It's about being role models, isn't it? It's about setting an example.
Yeah.
It's about doing the right thing. Oleksandr Usyk has been nothing but a gentleman. He's been the ultimate professional in every single fight. He's been humorous. He's been comical. He's given value for money. He's been exciting. He's given boxing masterclasses. He's done everything the right way. And also, let's not forget that his country's been in a war and been invaded, and he's had all of that stuff. And he's got family who are still in Ukraine, and he's had a rough old time. There was pictures of him on the front line with a AK-47 or whatever it was, only a couple of years ago or less. So he's not only done all of these things and done some remarkable stuff recently, but he's done it under the most remarkable circumstances. So yeah, I think we need to appreciate him. He's a generational fighter and someone that in years to come we can tell the grandkids, yeah, I watched his fight live. Whether it was on the TV or it was ringside in Riyadh, it doesn't matter. We're a part of this generation who watched Oleksandr Usyk.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, incredible fighter. And, really excited to see the matchup. Before we get your prediction on the fight, Darren, I want to ask you about, what happens with the winner, because by the sounds of it, from what Tyson Fury's been saying, we'll have a rematch most likely between the two, whatever the outcome. And then Anthony Joshua's kind of waiting in the wings for the winner of this fight. And if it is Usyk, do you think we do get that trilogy fight? And, under this kind of reborn Anthony Joshua, would you be a bit more hopeful that Joshua might be able to get something out of this fight? Or I know I watched Shane McGuigan say the other day that he feels like no matter what, Usyk's kind of got Joshua's number now, when they fight. But do you feel like, under Ben Davison, that Anthony Joshua would be a different proposition compared to what he was in the first two fights?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Shane McGuigan on this, and Shane obviously knows his onions and knows them well. When I was watching Usyk versus Joshua 1 earlier on, he was just a better man, like in every way, in his movement, in his punching ability, in his skill set, just literally everything. He was just a better man. And Joshua landed some good punches, but I think I gave Joshua like 2 rounds out of the 12. So if Oleksandr Usyk got 10 rounds from me, and I know the scorecards were fairly wide by the end of it, that's a lot of ground to make up and to come back and beat him. And although Joshua's getting better, so is Usyk. Like he's constantly getting better and constantly performing at the highest level. So yeah, I can't see it. I'd like to see Anthony Joshua get a win over Usyk because he's a British fighter, and I think the vast majority of the time he's done things the right way. But yeah, I'll have to agree with Shane McGuigan on that one. I think Usyk is his bogeyman.
Sure. No, fair enough. I guess everyone's got a bogeyman somewhere. A few other things, really exciting to hear that it sounds like there's going to be like a Riyadh season card in London at Wembley this winter, is what a lot of, that Turkey Al Sheikh will kind of, host and oversee, and it'll be in London. And that's really exciting for me, as and I'm sure it is for you as well, Darren. If it does happen, as boxing fans, we want to see the big fights, and the big fight is still happening in places that we can go to. I personally can't afford to go to Saudi Arabia a few times a year and go over to the kingdom. It'd be really cool to, but it's just not feasible for most people, I'd say, if living in Britain. So in my opinion, it's really exciting to hear that the sounds of it, Anthony Joshua versus either Philip Hrgovic or Daniel Dubois, whoever wins that fight on the 5v5. That card could be taking place at Wembley Stadium, something like that. It's really exciting in my opinion. What's your take on it, Darren? Do you see something like that as exciting for the British fight fans?
Yeah, I think the way that the Saudis are doing business is a bit different now. Like I think they realise, and everyone involved in it, that it's not just about hosting these mega shows in Saudi Arabia. Yes, a big part of this is to grow the sport in Saudi Arabia and get people to the country and all the other things which they're attempting to do. But they've also put this. They're also responsible for this card in I think it's in LA, isn't it? It's in America in a couple of
Terence
months' time.
Crawford won.
Yes, and
Yeah,
Andy Ruiz Jr. fighting Jarrell Miller, and
yeah.
it's just a bonkers card full of like very well known names. So they're very much aware, and maybe Saudi becomes kind of the home of what they're doing, if you like, but they're gonna splash out and build the brand and build the image in other parts of the world as well. So that's definitely a good thing. One of the things I have heard, and maybe this might be the Wembley thing, might not be, is they're looking to do a 5v5 of American fighters only versus British fighters only.
Oh
So,
wow.
so there might be one in London, and there might be one in New York or something like that. But
Yeah,
that
yeah.
really cause some excitement, couldn't it? You
Oh
know,
yeah, 100%.
you know who you need for the American side of it is Don King with his flags.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah, no, that is really exciting, and I mean, brings us on nicely. We can talk about it. Don King, you've just produced the 8 episode docu series on BBC Sounds. 8 episodes, right? I'm right in saying
8-part series. That's right. Yeah.
eight-part series. Yeah, on BBC Sounds. Just kind of going into Don King and the crazy kind of life of the man, the boxing promoter that he's still doing stuff to this day. I mean, talk to us about that documentary, the work that kind of went into it, what it is, and yeah, feel free to just give it a little plug and your involvement in it.
Yeah, so it's called Powerplay: The House of Don King. It's available on BBC Sounds as a box set now, or on Apple, Spotify, etc. One episode every week on a Thursday. So it was written by Steve Bunce, who is a bit of a veteran of the boxing media world, and one of the kind of most well known and most loved pundits, etc. for BBC and TNT, etc. And then I produced basically the series. I went out to New York, I went to Philadelphia, and I caught up with people like Tim Witherspoon, former heavyweight champion of the world, Thomas Hauser, one of the greatest boxing writers of all time, and the man who wrote Muhammad Ali's autobiography. I also caught up with a guy called Joseph Spinelli, who's a former FBI agent, and I met him in Wall Street on the top floor of a building in a very fancy boardroom, and spoke to him about his involvement in investigating Don King and Don King Promotions, etc. So the story is absolutely fascinating. Don King was responsible for the death of 2 people, and he was very, very lucky to not get the death penalty, having been in America. And the fact that he is probably the biggest and the most famous boxing promoter of all time, and what he's achieved is just completely nuts. And people who will go and check it out, you'll be hooked, I hope, from the first episode, and you'll just want to hear more and more of it. But yeah, Powerplay: The House of Don King is it's good. I hope it is anyway.
No, it is good. I'm personally partway through it on episode 3 at the moment, and really enjoying it. Whilst I'm in the gym, giving it a listen. So I'll make sure to pop a link down below. So if people want to check it out, then make sure you can, or you can listen to it on BBC Sounds. So yeah, no, excited to listen to the rest of that, and nice one with that, Darren. Must have been very very cool to get over to the States to do some of those interviews. What happened with the whole Lennox Lewis thing? How easy was it to get hold of Lennox Lewis? Was that mainly just through Steve? And because the two of them kind of at the moment are kind of like co-narrating the story, aren't they? And hearing from
Yeah.
Lennox's experiences with Don King.
Yeah, so we wanted a big name, and in particular, a big boxing name to be like a co-narrator. And Lennox being around that era of the Don King era, etc., was basically the perfect person. So yeah, through Steve Bunce and some other contacts, we got the opportunity to present the idea to Lennox, and he was on board. So Steve and some of the guys at Shooting Sharp Productions, who the production company who made it, flew out to Toronto to go and meet Lennox. Spent a couple of days with him recording all the bits which you hear on the documentary, and then I basically took that stuff along with all the interviews which I did in Philadelphia and New York and so on, and then made it kind of a final product. Have I ever told you the story, Dan, of my encounter with the mafia making this?
You haven't, but I feel like we need to hear it now. The mafia.
For legal reasons and for making sure nobody gets hurt, I'll have to leave some names out of this and change
Okay.
one. But
Okay.
bear with me; it's a good story.
Go
So
on.
when I was in New York, I got a tip off that a very famous fighter was in the city, and I got this fighter's number, and I gave him a call, and I said, "I'm making this documentary about Don King, the life and crimes of Don King. Any chance I could come and meet you and interview for it?" And he said, "Yeah, okay." He says, "But I want to meet you in my favorite Sicilian restaurant in Brooklyn." So I was like, "Okay, no problem." I was there by myself. I had time to kill. I was more than happy with that. I was going to meet a legend who'd headlined at Caesar Palace and Madison Square Gardens and whatever else. And he says to me, "Where are you staying?" I said, "I'm staying in Lower Manhattan." He says, "Well, you need to get the R train here, the F train there." And he said, "When you get to this subway station in Brooklyn," he said, "do not walk, Darren." He said, "Get an Uber or get a taxi." So I said, "Okay, yeah, fair enough." Anyway, I looked at the Uber when I got there, and it was like $35. Now I'm on BBC, money here, so my expenses were limited. So I thought I'll walk it, and I'll have a nice steak later on instead. Well, I soon discovered why he said you need to get an Uber or a taxi, Darren, because it was like Alan Carr walking through a scene of 8 Mile. I eventually got to this.
Really?
It was hilarious. I got approached by loads of different people, and somehow I made it to the restaurant. I get to the restaurant, and I call up the fighter who I'm there to meet, and he says, he says, "I forgot I was meeting you." And I was like, "Oh no." He says, "Can you wait a couple of hours?" So I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll wait a couple of hours." So I set up all the stuff. I've got all my BBC microphones, BBC Radio 5 Live, got a big mixer, I've got some cameras set up, and people are intrigued. They're kind of, walking up to me and asking me a couple of questions. And then these two old boys walked up to me, and they honestly looked like they just jumped out of a set of Goodfellas, like scars on their face, jewelry all over them. And this is how one of them spoke. He come up to me, he goes, "Hey, what you doing, kid?" And I said, "Oh, all right, mate. Just from the BBC in London. I'm here making a documentary." And he said, "Who you here to interview?" And I told him who it was. He said, "Oh, that's okay. I know him." He said, "You interviewing him about his career?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm making a documentary about Don King, the old boxing promoter. Lived a very colourful life. He killed 2 people." And he said, "Oh, I know Don King. Okay, fine." He said, "Well, look after yourself, kid. You gotta have the shrimp with the mozzarella. It's fantastic." But he's intimidating but fairly pleasant. Well, this fighter comes in, and these 2 guys who had just approached me are sat on the table next to me, and I'm asking this fighter questions about Don King, and he's just not giving me anything. He's just like, and he's normally an amazing talker, and he's shaking his head, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? He's shaking his head. So I heat my questions up and I say, Don King was a bad man. He kicked 2 people. He kicked a man to death on a street in Cleveland in daylight. And he's going, what's going on here? Anyway, these 2 old boys, they get up and they walk out. And the fighter says to me, he says, "I'm really sorry about that, man." He said, "I had to be careful what I said there." And I said, oh, okay. Why was that? He said, do you not know who was sat next to you? And I was like, no. And this isn't the guy's name, but it sounded similar like this. He went,
Yeah.
that was Crazy Cat Cologne. And the name was like that, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
that. He Googled this person, shows me a
Yeah.
picture of him. So this guy is like a prolific Italian mafia boss who'd been running drugs and
Really?
weapons in Brooklyn, loads of different stuff. Like, you know, just escaped like a 30-year prison sentence, loads and loads of really, really like terrible things. Like he's
Yeah.
a proper mafia boss. And I went, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I said, so why why did you have to be careful what you were saying? And he looked left, right around the restaurant, and he leant in and he went, because he's a good friend of Don King's.
Wow.
And I was like, oh,
Oh, wow.
there's me telling him, you know, what a bad man Don King was and all the terrible
Yeah.
things. And you never see me get an Uber out of Brooklyn so quickly.
Oh, mate, that's brilliant. That's
It was a
brilliant.
highlight documentary.
I bet, mate. I bet. And what? So Don King now knows that there was a. We a bit like, oh, so Don King might now, you know, might get passed on to him that he's someone's making a documentary about how bad he was. So might send a hit team out or something like that to stop it happening.
Honestly, I got back to my hotel in Lower Manhattan, and I just like straight up to the hotel room, locked the doors. My wife was like, "It might be the last time we speak."
So did you this fighter then after this mafia boss left? Did this fighter, you know, redo his answers with you? Did he, you know, give you some more kind of in-depth stuff or not?
Yeah, no, we sorted everything out and did everything properly. But yeah, no, I better not mention who it is or mention the actual mafia boss's name, just in case it all comes back. And next time I'm in New York, I might not come back.
Oh, brilliant, mate, brilliant.
Documentary. It's a fascinating listen.
100%. Yeah, Powerplay, The House of Don King. I'll put a link in the description. Make sure to check it out. Darren, let's get back on track with the boxing side of things. Just on that card out in Saudi, Opetaia versus Breedis is, you know, the chief support, the one before the main event. Jai Opetaia is an incredibly exciting cruiserweight. That knockout, you know, when he fought Elisoro was absolutely devastating. Felt like a bit of a mismatch in there. Opetaia Breedis is the rematch from their previous fight. What do you make of this fight?
I just think it's such a good fight to be sticking on an undercard. It's like the sort of bout which you just expect to see as a main event. So it's a treat to have it. But Opetaia, what a fighter he is! He's just so tough. It's ridiculous how tough he is, and I can't see him losing it. I can't see him losing it at all. I think he'd be just too strong, too determined, too hungry. I think Opetaia will win that in 4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah, and I mean I don't disagree with you. I think he's, you know, he's a bit of a terrifying fighter. And I mean, we'll talk about it in the next episode. But if Billum Smith is to come through Reactpor and, you know, go on a few unification fights, you know, that fight against Opetaia would be incredible to see. Yeah, on the rest of the card, though, you know, special shout out to, I'm sure you'll echo this, to Portsmouth's Mark Chamberlain, fighting back on another Saudi card. You know, incredible story with Mark and how he was, you know, selected by Turkey Al Sheikh to go out to Saudi after just fighting in, you know, like York Hall, Bethnal Green, Copper Box Arena, you know, these kind of places, to now fighting in Saudi. You know, it's an incredible journey, and he won his last fight as well against Gavin Gwynn. It was a great performance. So the fight. This time his fight against Joshua Wahab, I believe, is an exciting one. We'll look forward to that one. And an interesting line as well from a local perspective, Darren. You know that I work for BBC in the South, and you've been down with us at Radio Solent a few times before. You know, of course, Ryan Garner is a super featherweight from Southampton that we cover, and he fought at the weekend against Liam Dillon. at York Hall. Cracking fight. You were there for York Hall. You weren't there for that fight, but brilliant night of boxing there. He fought against Liam Dillon, and Liam Dillon is the one man that Joshua Wahab, who's fighting Mark Chamberlain, has lost to in his career. So interesting little kind of drawing the
Yeah,
lines there.
yeah, some potential matchups, isn't there, around that? And there's the whole Pompey versus Southampton stuff. But for Mark Chamberlain, how nuts is it for him
Yeah.
and he's not a fighter who puts himself out there in terms of media, etc. Because I've reached out to him in the past, and he's never really been keen on doing anything in terms of like interviews or whatever else. And there's lots of fighters like that, just like to keep themselves to themselves. Like Kevin Mitchell was very much like that. And it doesn't matter what level you're at. But then for him to be on his second Saudi bill on a card like this, like out of nowhere, and hopefully he's getting paid handsomely for it as well. It's just these are the stories you want to hear about.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, hopefully some big fights coming up for Mark Chamberlain as well. And that fight v Ryan Garner will be good fun. I know Chamberlain's fighting at lightweight at the moment instead of super featherweight, and he's fought his last few there. But it's only that fight could definitely happen. It would be good to see. And of course, I don't know if you were there for the other fight, but Southampton's Royston Barney Smith winning at York Hall as well. He's 20 years old and he's 10-0 in his professional career already. It's crazy. Good fighter. But yeah, lots of exciting potential fights down in the south as well. Darren, it's been a pleasure to chat Saudi boxing, Fury Usyk with you. Let's get a final prediction. How do you see this fight going? The main event, Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk. You've had your time to get your head around it to come up with a prediction. I'm still not too sure myself, but how do you see this fight going?
One of my good friends, Bobby Blundell, is a really good boxing MC. He used a phrase earlier on. He said, "I've got splinters on my backside. How much I'm sitting on the fence for this." I know exactly what he means by it, and I do feel a little bit like him. But if I'm thinking with my head, and I have to think with my head, and I have to think logically, as good as Usyk is, as wonderful as he is in terms of his ability and his technique, and all of his tricks, and just everything that I could say about him, I have got to go back to Fury being the bigger, probably the stronger, the furthest reach, the more experienced. He's boxed more rounds, and I think we'll get a points decision for Tyson Fury in the end, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was quite controversial as well.
Damn, can never get through without controversy. Darren, thank you so much. Honestly, I'm still on the fence. I've got no clue how this fight goes. It's going to be a great one though on Saturday night. Can't wait for it. Hopefully it's not gone midnight by the time we get national anthems and the main event. But yeah, can't wait for it. Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk, Darren, it's been a pleasure to chat about, chat that with you, chat through about Don King and the stories there. So no, thank you for your time. And anything else you want to plug before we go?
No, I guess just the Don King stuff, and go and check out the other podcast, the Opening Bell podcast with Matt Christie and Alex Steedman. That is that's solid for the boxing purist. You'll hear about every fighter, every punch, everything in that podcast. So yeah, check that one out if you love your boxing.